Thanks, Ken. I think
Okay.
you're probably the first and one and only person who can say that all in one breath. My title. Okay. So my name is Melanie Belmore, and I'm not going to repeat my title as Ken did a good job doing that already. But the purpose of the faculty presentation is to get an idea and to see some of the important work that's going on within UCN and within the faculty themselves. I want to say that I know it's lunch hour, and I know some of us are at home. So, of course, you're not obligated to sit at your laptop. You could just walk around and make yourself some lunch and turn up your speaker, which is, I think, one of the good things about Zoom conference as well, is that we have the ability to do that. So the first, and I also wanted to acknowledge the speakers this morning as well. I think we've heard a lot of good information, and also they shared a lot of knowledge and a lot of their story as well, which is very, very important when we're talking about truth, and especially when we're talking about reconciliation. So I'll introduce the first speaker, who is Gary Melko, and he's the Dean of Trade and Technology.
Hello. I don't know if I'm not sure if it switched to the main screen for me, did it? There we go.
There you go.
Okay. Can you see a PowerPoint? Because I can't on my Zoom.
Yes, we can.
You can? Okay. Not sure, that's never happened. But, so hopefully you can see my name's come up there, Gary Melko. I'm the Dean of Staff at UCN. And what STAT stands for is Skilled Trades, Apprenticeship, and Technology. I've been in this position for over 2 years. We've started to work on a inclusion of Indigenous curriculum within the material of the trades programs and technology programs. What I wanted to talk more about today, though, was some of the focus I've been using towards offering trades programs within the ones we offer in the communities. I'm gonna put up a list here of programs that are offered on either main campuses or in communities. We have 3 different mechanic programs that we can offer: small motors, automotive, or heavy duty. We have a carpentry woodworking program. A program that's fairly new to us now is a home builder program. It's similar to a carpentry program, but it's developed in a way that we can produce a house out of the practical component that's done in the program. So in our carpentry woodworking program, we don't have time to actually build and complete a house because of the other amount of skills that are taught in that program. So home builders becoming quite a popular ask for information anyways on bringing that to communities. We have a new program called Foundations for Trades. I'm going to explain that one a little bit more later. Electrical, welding, culinary arts, and plumbing. So, I mean, this isn't all we do in the stat department at UCN, but this is a quick list of programs that work in communities and that we're actively planning in some communities. So the change that's been taking place is in my plan, the idea for these programs to run well within a community is finding instructors from that community, working with them, giving them the skills to learn to be an instructor and to share the knowledge that they've learned over their time as skilled tradespeople. So here's kind of the model that it follows now. Somebody, a community will get a hold of me. We'll talk about the program that they are interested in running. We'll have a discussion on any projects that might be coming up in the community. A lot of communities are looking at building new schools, new stores, housing, especially new houses. So we'll talk about what's the need for the training in the community, and then the next thing we talk about is who possible instructors would be. So traditionally, instructors have come in from outside of the communities, but I'm trying to take a different approach and looking for people that likely aren't instructors yet, but are tradespeople, and then providing the mentorship and the training that they would need to become instructors. So this isn't brand new. Been over a year now. I've been talking, of course, because of COVID, a lot of the programs didn't. One of them got postponed, and some of the other ones didn't start. But talking to 4 different communities at this time about this plan, looking for, coming up with names first of people that might be instructors, then meeting with them and discussing next steps if they're interested, and how we would support that person if it works on to move on as instructor. Sometimes these instructors will come from neighboring communities if we can't, find one within a community, but it still holds big benefits that way too. So I'm just putting the same list up again for a second here. Community program offerings and trades. These, the majority of this list is 10-month programs. Okay, so they vary a little bit within the hours of the program, but that's our 10-month programs. This is our only 5-month program at the time. It's called Foundations for Trades. This is more of a pre-trades type program offering that some communities are interested in. There are a few benefits as far as planning this program. We can run this Foundations for Trades program with an instructor from any of the trades that are recognized in Manitoba. And there's 55 different trades in Manitoba. So finding an instructor in a community for this program is a lot easier than a more specific one like auto mechanics, for example. And what this program is, it focuses on teaching students about all the trades that are in Manitoba and across Canada, how the apprenticeship system works, helps people in this program decide if trades is the area that is for them. And it also will build a lot of the basic skills needed for any trades: measuring, hand tool use, power tool use. A lot of people don't get any chances to to use any tools as they grow up. So that's actually, it's our newest program that's useful for many communities. Some communities know specifically what trade they want to offer, and in some cases, Foundations for Trade is a good starting point. So I mentioned this earlier on when we're first talking about running a trade in a community, we have to look at if there's big projects coming up. Example, if a new school is being built and we know a company's coming in maybe even a year from now to do that work, sometimes agreements can be made that they'll hire so many entry-level trades graduates to work on the programs that they're coming to build in your community. We can run programming in any community in northern Manitoba. It doesn't have to necessarily have a center, a UCN center. It's possible to run. We do run programs in communities that don't have UCN centers. So there's a lot of info there, fairly quick to see. It's recorded, obviously, so anybody can go back and have a look at this. And the main thing to remember is if you or anyone you know wants to discuss this kind of programming further, there's my contact info. And I'd be happy to, talk to anybody about any plans that you want to look for moving forward, and about possible instructors in their communities. And that's it. I don't know. Let's see. I don't know how to stop sharing this because that's it.
Thanks, Gary, for the presentation. Now, if anybody has questions for any of the faculty members that are presenting, you can put them in the chat box. And once we go through all the presentations, I'll present the questions to the presenters. So next up, we have Abayomi from Faculty of Business. From the Faculty of Arts, Business and Science, but more specifically, the Business Department. Abayomi? Hey.
Hello. Hello. I hope I'm audible. Yeah, good. Yeah, thank you all. And first, I'd like to acknowledge everyone, and especially our elders that are present here today, because we can learn a lot from you. Also, I'd like to acknowledge the territory that we're in, territory number 5, and also thank the Aboriginal people for the generosity. Now, the presentation today is about implementing call to action, and we're going to look at the ongoing success and challenges in education. And our focus here really would be business. And so I'm going to be sharing my screen right away. PowerPoint here. Okay. So as you've heard before, my name is Abayomi, and I'm with the business program here at UCN, University College of the North. And I'm just going to quickly run you through the agenda and what my presentation today would really highlight. So we've really done the introduction and the opening remarks. That's really out of the way. Now, the next segment will focus on UCN's mission and vision. I hardly do presentation without reflecting on the mission and vision of UCN. And then we'll take a look at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission document. And we'll look at about 7 or so themes from the document. And then we'll go into the application, the call to action, with focus on the business program. We'll look at how we're trying to implement it, the ongoing challenges, and then the reality. And then there will be opportunity for questions and responses from the audience. And so let's take our mind back to UCN mission statement. As many of you are aware, UCN serves the northern community and people. That's what the mission states. And it does it with education, training and teaching, and learning, and also research. And it does so in an inclusive and respectful way that recognizes indigenous values and northern values as well. So everything we do in business, we try as much as possible to reflect this mission statement. Now, with respect to the vision, well, it says, guided by the 7 sacred teachings, UCN is building better futures for a stronger North. Well, how is business contributing to this? As one of the speakers earlier mentioned, education can help facilitate change in our environment. And no doubt UCN and business in this regard is doing its own share in a way. Now, the focus on the 7 or so themes from the Truth and Reconciliation are highlighted here. The first one I'm looking at here, it's number 7. I don't know if you have the document, but I don't have my document here. It's about eliminating educational or employment gaps between the Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadian. That's one. How do we do that? Well, the discussion that's going to follow in the next slide will really speak to each of these themes. Now, the second is about improving educational attainment level and success rate, so that our students that are coming in would have the potential to excel at their studies. We also strive to develop culturally appropriate curricula, which is in line with number 10 on the Truth and Reconciliation Call to Action document. Now, I really like this number 57 because it's about educating public servants. Well, a lot of public servants, sad to say, that are not really aware or say ignore indigenous perspective. And if these public servants are not aware of indigenous knowledge, then there's no way they're going to include it or reflect it in their policy. So it's very paramount for public servants to be aware or educated in a way that is reflective of indigenous knowledge. So that should be, in my view, a push, not just in the North, but provincial, maybe even Canada-wide, so that policy, whatever the policy, maybe education, health, and other policies that you can think of, can reflect, can be inclusive and reflective of indigenous way of knowing and ideas. Also, integrate indigenous knowledge teaching methods in our classroom, and that is number 62 on the document. 62.1 and then 62.2, I believe, is utilize indigenous knowledge teaching methods in our classroom. That's kind of repetitive. And then the next one, it's about building student capacity. Sorry about that. Building student capacity for intercultural understanding. Now, if you have multiple students from different backgrounds, well, if there is no intercultural understanding, then it'll be really difficult for people to work together. So it's very important for that intercultural understanding. Now, the next one is about Aboriginal people have equitable access to jobs, training, and educational opportunity. How do we do that? At UCN, you're going to see the use of technology to facilitate education in various communities across the North. So let's get into it here. The call to action and reconciliation, specific focus here is this business program. Now, one of the things we do is encourage our faculty in our program to participate in cultural proficiency training program. I attended the Part 1 and Part 2 in the past, and we encourage faculty to jump in and take the program or any educational opportunity that would enable them to enhance their understanding of Aboriginal knowledge and culture and way of knowing as well. We also do faculty recruitment and training. Well, we try and recruit those individuals that reflect the mission and vision of UCN. And that's one of the things we look at when we are recruiting. If a faculty doesn't, if a potential employee applicant doesn't reflect or buy into the mission and vision of UCN, then it will really be hard to see that person as integral to enhancing indigenization of the curriculum that we're trying to do here at UCN and in our department. So we look for people who reflect the mission and vision that UCN has stated. The other thing we do is we try as much as possible to develop curricula that is appropriate and reflective of indigenous perspective, right? And we work with GUD in their department, Ray department at UCN. When we're doing new program or new course development, we try to go, we run things through to the department so that we make sure that the content reflect indigenous ideas and perspective. So we have various programs at in our department, business department. One is a Bachelor of Business Administration. We also have a Bachelor of Business Administration Diploma. We have an Office Assistant certificate. We also have Community Economic Development. And there is the Aboriginal and Northern Tourism Hospitality Management program. And then the Public Admin Certificate program. Now, with respect to teaching, well, we ensure that pedagogy reflects indigenous content and worldview, and there's various ways to do that. It could be something as simple as the way we instruct. It could be something as simple as the materials we use and the content as well. So those are some of the ways that we use to ensure that our teaching is inclusive of indigenous content. Now, to reach remote and northern communities, of course, we use technology, and that again contributes to the mission of UCN. And recall that mission is to serve northern communities, right? And we know that geography is so wide, right? So to enhance the capacity of individuals in these various and isolated communities, a best shot in a cost-effective way is the use of technology. It helps UCN, but also helps the community because now families don't have to be disintegrated, right? You don't have to leave your family and go to the south and go get education. You can receive your education close to home in your community, and that brings family together and continuity of the family as well. What about research? Well, we follow OCAP. Yeah, there is TCPS too, but then, well, we follow OCAP as well. I know in my research, we talk to people in the community before you can actually go in and gather data, because not doing so, it's considered disrespectful, right? So OCAP principle is it's very important to researchers. And I'm a member of REB, Research Ethics Board at UCN. So if we see application maybe somebody conducting research and is trying to go to indigenous community. Well, have you talked to somebody in the community? Have you talked to chief and council? Who is involved? What about the ownership, the control, the access, right? And then the interpretation of the results, right? So that it's not skewed in a way that is damaging to the community. Now, we have articulation agreement. In business program, we have articulation agreement with AFOA, Aboriginal Financial Officers Association. Yeah, so we have articulation agreement with them. Now, the agreement, I think, is going to expire in July, so we will be renewing that agreement and contacting them for another 5 years, I believe. So we have ongoing agreement with them. Now, what are some implementation, or maybe you can say success, because this is still ongoing, right? So we work with our communities, and we work with elders, with our instructors. They bring elders in to have discussion with the class, right? Maybe you're doing HR, right? So you can bring in, I know in the past I've done that when I taught human resource, brought in an elder to come discuss with the class, right? And one of the things we looked at was about conflict and conflict resolution. Now, the other thing though is when we look at incorporating indigenous perspective in our curricula, one thing I know for me, it's to recognize my own bias. Because if you don't recognize your own bias, then it's really going to be difficult to see things through what I call cultural lens, right? And to see things from another person's culture. So it's very important for ones, to recognize their own bias, and then they can move on in a way that is respectful and inclusive. What about textbooks and the approach we use? Well, with respect to textbook, many textbooks are really they promote colonial ideas and Eurocentric philosophy or ways. So what we do, our instructors, what we do is put our indigenous slant on things that we do in our classes. And we also supplement mainstream textbook with articles published by indigenous scholars. So we do that. Now, the other thing we do is we encourage critique in our classroom, and no knowledge, it's bad. At least in my view, I often encourage students to look at things and not accept things at face value, especially if it's contradictory to one's culture, right? So you want to speak and then educate others, so that they can be more aware of indigenous culture. We also use stories, and we do that. My colleagues have used rearrange their classroom when they're delivering their classes, and they get students to tell their stories, and that way students learn from one another. And we see examples of the use of stories this morning by one of our speakers, an elder. Now, let's talk about some of the challenges. And in my view, one of the challenges is a lack of knowledge or experience in the area of Aboriginal culture. And this is so because many people can't really comprehend intergenerational trauma that residential school and the discounting of indigenous culture has caused. And so it's very important to acknowledge this impact. Without that, it would really be hard to embrace indigenization of the curriculum. And so that's one challenge. The other one is lack of confidence. A lot of people are like, well, if I don't do it properly, how am I going to perceive? Well, you shouldn't be afraid. Do it and learn, and people would understand they're putting in the effort. Educate yourself, and that way you learn how to do it right. And so don't let fear hold you back. And that seems to be, in my view, what is holding some people back, because, yeah, I don't want to offend anybody, then they want to step back and not want to do nothing. Well, guess what? Do something, because not doing anything, it's actually, an embrace, in my view, of colonial ideas and Eurocentric views. So something has to be done. Now, the other one is the recognition that Eurocentric educational practices and philosophy are deeply embedded in a policy and delivery model. And we probably should tear down and reconstruct the way education policy is developed and the delivery model, so that it can reflect the cultural views, practices, and ceremonies, and things that are really unique to indigenous people. Now, in business, we talk about globalization and we use a lot of business language. Well, many of these, they disregard indigenous knowledge and way of knowing. And so it's important then to ask our students, in your community, what do you think? And from global, we bring it down to local. That way, it will be more relevant to our students. And yes, textbook is a hindrance. So we need to recognize that, and it's a big challenge. So instructors have to make a conscious choice in terms of selecting the materials and textbook they use in their classes. And so we want to choose textbooks that are reflective of indigenous culture, and published by, or use materials that are published, and videos and other content that are published by indigenous authors. Now, the final slide here is the reality. So the reality is that colonial curriculum, or Eurocentric curriculum, if you want to polish it that way, has psychological effect, and it's alienating people, and also it's constructed in a way that is meant to dominate. And we've heard a lot about that wonderful job that Jenny did earlier in terms of helping us to see how colonialism affects people. So we need to know that, and that is something that we always need to be cognizant of. Now, it also disenfranchises or marginalizes indigenous people and their lived experience. So that's what colonialism can do to people. So we need to recognize that. And that forms the basis for change, the basis for why we want to indigenize the curriculum and why we do it in the business department here at UCN. So we do it. The indigenization is a way of promoting holistic way of knowing. And when we do holistic way of knowing, then it can empower people, and then it can prepare our students for communal responsibility instead of individualism. As our speaker earlier talked about, the king, queen, farmers, and all the rest. That's the way of Europe-centric Western ideas, which is contrary to indigenous way of doing things, in this case, communal. Now, if you have somebody that is challenging, not wanting to go along with the idea of indigenization, maybe you can get that individual to do one simple exercise. You can get them to stand up on one feet and try to walk. Can they do that? Well, maybe that can get them to think twice, right? Because if you try to stand on one feet and try to walk, you feel pain. And I tell you, you're not going to go far, right? But then get them to put the second feet down and try walk. Now it's easier to walk. And that's what indigenization does. So that simple exercise, in my view, can help people think twice about their own bias, and they'll be more focused, be more willing to embrace the idea of indigenization. And that's the end of the presentation. And questions, discussions entertained now. So I think I can stop sharing. Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Abayomi. That was very good, very informative. Again, if you do have questions, insert them in the chat box, and we can address them after our last presentation speaker, Lynette Plett, who's the Associate Vice President of Access at UCN. So Lynette, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Melanie. I want to begin by acknowledging that my ancestors settled in Treaty 1 territory. These are the traditional lands of many Indigenous peoples, especially the Roseau River and Anishinaabe First Nation, and is the homeland of the Métis. As a descendant of Mennonites who settled what we refer to as the East Reserve in 1874 and 1875, I acknowledge that my foremothers and forefathers benefited directly from Treaty 1, signed in 1871, because it opened the region to farming and the development of Mennonite villages and communities while relegating the Roseau River Anishinaabe people to 2 tracts of land on the banks of the Roseau River. Furthermore, I acknowledge that my parents, my 6 siblings, and I lived and worked to develop a prosperous farm in Treaty 2 territory, clearing bush and roots and stones to cultivate fertile land to grow wheat and oats and barley. Our First Nations neighbors to the north, Peguis and Fisher River, were dispossessed of these lands to benefit settler colonialism. And now I am privileged to live and work in Treaty 5 territory, the traditional lands of the Opaskwayak Cree Nation. My name is Lynette Plett. I'm the Associate Vice President of the Access Department, with responsibilities that include administering budgets and programs for 11 post-secondary education access centers throughout the North, as well as deliver adult education programming, adult learning centers in Thompson, Tatasqueyac, and Matthias Colomb. And we're also developing and delivering adult literacy and essential skills programming and preparation for post-secondary prep studies for both our main campuses as well as our other UCN communities. I read recently that the land acknowledgement creates a space for Indigenous peoples, and that the acknowledgement says that we see you, we acknowledge you were here on this land before us, and that we are committed to reconciling our relationship. This is certainly true for me. And it is this commitment that brought me to UCN to work here about 2 years ago. But I have a continuous question or attention that when I put myself directly into the picture, as I've done with the land acknowledgement, or as I've done in the leadership position at UCN, I wonder to what extent that continues to highlight settler or colonial history over the history of Indigenous peoples. I wonder what my role as a leader at UCN is with truth and reconciliation as a non-Indigenous leader. This is a question and a tension that is always quite close to the surface for me, both personally as well as in my professional role. I'm very excited to be part of this conversation at this panel. And more importantly, I'm so excited and privileged to have the opportunity to participate in these kinds of conversations that lead to action as part of my daily work at UCN, with my colleagues, with instructors, and with community partners. And I will, if I have time later, I'll provide a little bit more information about my own kinds of journey and questions as I lead in truth and reconciliation actions at UCN. But in preparation for this presentation, for my participation on the panel, I asked our Access Department staff for their input into how we respond to the calls to action. So I'm going to share my screen now. Just a little bit. Okay. I'm on two screens. I'm not used to this. So I asked the post-secondary education access centers, coordinators at our centers, I asked them some questions. So one of the things I asked them was, in what way does the Access Center contribute to the calls to action? And the responses that came in were by offering courses in the community so families don't have to leave. The coordinators work with funding groups to ensure that Indigenous students receive funding and resources to attend school. We have local First Nations and Indigenous board members who contribute to discussions about what programs and services are needed in the community. And our centers provide access to students as well as community members to access computers and information technology, and as well as library services. Another question that I asked the coordinators is how do the programs and courses delivered at the center contribute to the calls? And the responses included by offering diplomas and degrees without the family and students having to leave family and community. We deliver the WMI course as part of the programs, which is an Indigenous traditional teachings course. I cannot pronounce the Cree word. And most of the programs that we deliver have cultural components or courses built in. And we use the community resources and knowledge keepers to teach traditional knowledge and practices. And then a third question that I asked was, in what way does your job and the way you do your job contribute to the calls to action? And the responses included that the individuals really want what's best, the best education that UCN can offer, especially for the youth and for special needs individuals. They help students to succeed by assisting them and supporting them with supplies and textbooks and finding childcare, meeting with them and others when they're struggling. A very important one right now is to make sure that the center is safe and clean for the students to learn in. Answering the phone and being available to answer questions about what programs are available. And there's also by participating in professional development, traditional teachings and ceremonies. So those are some of the responses from the Post-Secondary Education Access Center coordinators. And then for the Adult Learning Center instructors, I asked, how does the Adult Learning Center program contribute to the calls to action? And the responses included, and I summarized this as acknowledging location and history. So acknowledging where we are located in Treaty 5 territory, acknowledging or that we are located in First Nations communities in 2 instances right now. And by helping our students to achieve their goal of obtaining a grade 12. We also do this by building a community. So really important to build a community with the students, building student capacity for cultural understanding and empathy, working together to create a better present and future. So a lot of responses about building a community that is safe, fostering trust and respect, motivate the students by using praise and encouragement, working with them to overcome fears, anxieties, and challenges. They also talked about the importance of participating in professional development. So opportunities such as the TRC gathering, where instructors, students, and community can participate together. I asked specifically what the courses that they teach and how those contribute. So it's about how we endeavor to develop relevant and culturally appropriate curriculum. We provide a course called Current Topics in First Nations, Métis, and Inuit Studies. which covers topics such as residential schools, treaties, Indigenous peoples, historical and contemporary contributions. We work at incorporating culturally appropriate novels, for example. So those are a summary there. And then another question I asked was, how does the way that you teach the courses contribute to the calls to action? And again, they talked about the importance of creating a safe learning environment, delivering courses with respect, making sure that the environment is comfortable for students. So those were some of the comments from the students. Sorry, from the instructors. And I really appreciate and thank the everybody who provided information to put into that panel. Do I have a little more time, Melanie? Okay. So as the leader for the Access Department, I challenge us to think and reflect further. We can check off things that we do, but I wonder how our courses and our programs would look different if we were to deliberately discuss and plan responses to the calls to action. Would our students be more resilient? Would more students complete the programs that they start? So I'm always very concerned about whether we're delivering the programs, whether we're delivering the right programs and in our communities. Bringing the programs into First Nations communities, I don't feel is enough for truth and reconciliation and to the calls to action. If the programs are not appropriate, and if the students in the programs are not experiencing success, and if they leave after a few weeks or a few months or a year after starting the program and aren't able to complete. And so there are lots of questions I ask about how we can do things differently. And I think the way that we can do things differently, and there's so many speakers this morning that have talked about this, and how do we plan and start the programming with values and worldviews of Indigenous peoples. And I think that if we do that, and if we look at, for example, the illustration that Dr. Wilson had, the iceberg, if we really look at what's beneath the water and the things that we can't see, but really work at planning our programs and our courses with that in mind, I'm hopeful that our students will continue to be, will become more resilient, more successful, and attain the educational levels that they're going for. So that's what I have for today.
Thank you, Lynette, and thank you to all the faculty who spoke, Lynette, Abayomi, and Gary. There was no questions, but that doesn't mean that people are not asking questions. So what I think I'll do is I'll include your names and your email addresses in the chat box. So if anybody out there does have a question that they want to reach out to one of the presenters, by all means, please do so. Because I think one common theme that I heard amongst the three of them was that community relations with the community itself, right? We see with Gary Melko, who talked about the community approaching him and saying, this is what we want in our community, right? And then Gary, of course, working with the community and also hiring community experts, right? Or the experts within the community, and then training them to be instructors. So that way people are learning from community members. And if we look at Indigenous worldview or perspective, that's how we learn our yeah, that's how we've always learned, right? Within the community. And then Abayomi talking about especially the research, and again Abayomi did mention that he sits on the research ethic boards, right? And OCAP, right? The importance of the OCAP principles being used within research, and also how there's this fusion of Western and Indigenous methods and practices of education being used within the fact within his department, right? Um, and then, of course, being mindful and recognizing some of those Eurocentric philosophy and ideas, and how do we, incorporate more of an Indigenous, philosophy and perspective within the business department. And then Lynette, again, reaching out to the people that know the best on what's going on in the community is the community members themselves, the ones that work in the centers within the communities, and saying, and asking these specific questions. And one thing also I noticed is that there was no one set of call to action that the faculty are using. It's more of like a whole, right from 1 to 94, right? These are the calls to actions that we're looking at. We're not just opening up our little TRC calls to action book and turning to the section that says education or post-secondary education and focusing on that, right? Focusing on the whole calls to actions themselves. And also, again, the use of knowledge keepers that Lynette talked about, right? And building a community, building that trust and respect, because when we're talking about reconciliation, we're also talking about those community relations as well. And having the community involved, having the community be able to voice and represent themselves as well, right? So very good job. If there's any other last comments that three of you would like to make, you do have we got about 10 minutes before the next session, but I think some people might want to have a break as well. But if there are any other last comments that either of you have, please feel free. And what I'll do in the meantime is put in your contact information in the chat box here.
I think just, Melanie, just a final comment that I wanted to, Doug said at the beginning, the importance of UCN as being an organization where we can have the tough conversations and we can create the safe place for those difficult conversations and for gathering like this, like Truth and Reconciliation, and just acknowledging that the importance that for UCN and our and again, just to be able to be part of this conversation as that.
Yes, and there was a comment made that our northern Manitoba has more than nickel, water, natural resources. Our people are resources, and we have to all make our people priority. Our people and education must be priority. Thank you very much for that comment, and agree with you. Okay, I think we can conclude that. I think Ken is still out making his craft dinner. I'm not too sure, but I'm sure he'll be back at 1 o'clock to take over. I guess right now I'm going to step away until 1 o'clock, and have a good break, everyone.